Welcome to Friends and Fiction. 4 New York Times bestselling authors, endless stories. Novelists Mary Kay Andrews, Kristin Harmel, Kristy Woodson Harvey, and Patti Callahan Henry are 4 longtime friends with more than 70 published books between them. Together, they host Friends and Fiction, with author interviews and fascinating insider talk about publishing and writing, to highlight and support independent bookstores. They discuss the books they've written, the books they're reading now, and the art of storytelling. If you love books and you're curious about the writing world, you're in the right place.
Hello, everybody. It's Wednesday night. It's time for another episode of Friends and Fiction. We're really looking forward to our guest tonight, so let's get started.
I'm Kristy Woodson Harvey.
I'm Patti Callahan Henry.
I'm Meg Walker.
I'm Mary Kay Andrews, and as you probably noticed, Meg is our managing director, is sitting in tonight for our girl Kristin Harmel, who had a previous engagement and wants everybody to know how sorry she is to miss the fun. And of course, this is Friends.
She's really sad. She kept saying, please tell everyone, please tell everyone.
Yeah. And this is Friends and Fiction, 4 New York Times bestselling authors, endless stories to support indie bookstores, authors, and librarians. Tonight, we'll be talking with Lisa Jewell about her best-selling novel, The Family Remains.
And don't forget, as you know, we continue to encourage you to support independent booksellers when and where you can. And one way to do that is to visit our own Friends and Fiction bookshop.org page, where you can find Lisa's books and books by the 4 of us and all of our guests at a discount. And we, of course, are also continuing to encourage you to check out Macintosh Books' bookshop.org page. That did not sound right, but y'all know what I'm getting at. They have a ton of storm damage and are having to relocate their store. And in the meantime, this is a great way for us to support them.
And I know y'all have seen our fall schedule, and that's why you're here, but it's under announcements on our Facebook page with our almost 100,000 members we're closing in on. And next week, we get to talk to Ariel Lawhon, Christina McMorris, and Susan Meisner. All 3 have co-written a historical fiction novel called When We Had Wings. And then also on that show, we will have Santa Montefiore with her newest, An Italian Girl in Brooklyn. So obviously, you don't want to miss a single episode.
Great pronunciation, Patti. Very fancy.
I practiced. Thank you.
And we know many of you have been participating in our very first Friends and Fiction Reading Challenge, organized by our friend Anissa Armstrong. This month, we're reading books that feature family secrets. If you're looking for a way to keep track of these books and your other reading, we'd love to recommend our beautiful reading journal available at Oxford Exchange. And I'll just say, family secrets, I mean, what better than The Family Remains, Lisa Jewell's book, which you will hear about tonight.
Yeah, there are secrets on secrets on secrets in this book.
Yeah.
There's secrets inside the secrets.
Yeah.
Right? And you know, every week we have loved doing our new Ask Us Anything segment. So if you have a question for us, leave it under the thread in the Facebook page announcements, and we'll try to get to your questions in upcoming episodes. But we're going to do some today too.
Yeah. Okay, ladies, let's introduce Lisa. Lisa Jewell is a #1 New York Times bestselling author of several novels, including The Family Upstairs and Then She Was Gone.
Her work has been translated into 29 languages, and her novels have sold over 10 million copies internationally.
Yeah, piddly, right?
Yeah.
Her first novel, Ralph's Party, was the best-selling debut novel of 1999. And recently, Lisa has written several psychological thrillers, including The Girls and The Night She Disappeared, both of which were Richard and Judy book club picks.
Lisa lives in North London with her husband, her daughters, and what she calls the best dog in the world. Might have some.
We'll argue for that.
We could fight about that later. Yeah.
Her new novel, The Family Remains, was released earlier this year, and it's a standalone sequel to her earlier novel, The Family Upstairs.
Okay, welcome, Lisa. Sean, you going to bring? Oh, there she is.
Hi, Lisa.
Hello. Hi there. Lovely to be here.
We're so excited to have you here to discuss The Family Remains. To start us off, we would love it if you would tell us what this deeply disquieting novel is about. And then, if you don't mind, what's it really about?
Okay. So this deeply disquieting novel is actually a sequel to an equally, if not more disquieting novel, which you mentioned earlier, which is called The Family Upstairs. Because this is a novel followed by a sequel, when I talk about the sequel, I feel I have to bring the first book into it as well. Yeah. So then I end up it's like I'm talking about the biggest book in the world. So I'll try and keep it short. So The Family Upstairs is about a young girl, 25-year-old girl, who inherits an 8-bedroom mansion on the banks of the River Thames in an incredibly upmarket street called Cheyne Walk in Chelsea, which is worth millions and millions of pounds, which sounds wonderful, except she also finds that there's this terrible, terrible, dark backstory to this house where she was found as a baby, with 3 dead bodies in the kitchen that she doesn't find out about until she inherits the house. And then the rest of the book introduces us to what actually happened in this house back in the 80s and 90s. And it's very dark and very disturbing. And at the end of the book, it's kind of a happy ending for most of the characters. But there's one character who developed an obsession on another character in the first book. A boy called Henry Lamb was obsessed with one of the members of the family who came to live in his house, who was called Finn. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the first book, he finds out that Finn is working as a big game ranger in Botswana, and he thinks he's going to go and track him down. So that's the end of the first book. The second book is pretty much about Henry trying to track Finn down. Finn, who is not in Botswana at all, but it is somewhere completely different. And it also reopens the case of the 3 dead bodies on the floor in the mansion and what actually happened there in the 80s and 90s via the discovery of a bag of bones on the shores of the River Thames, not far from the big mansion in Chelsea, and a detective called Samuel Owusu, who's charged with finding out the identity of the bones and where they came from and how that person died. So there's other things going on as well, but we would be here all night listening to me talking.
We'd actually like that.
In these 2 books, and there is a lot going on in The Family Remains. But when you're in the book and reading it, it's not quite as confusing as it might sound having to describe it.
Now, is there a deeper meaning to The Family Remains? Were you trying to get at something, or were you?
I never write books trying to get at anything. I never write books trying to instill any sort of meaning, or I write stories. They don't. If somebody finds a meaning in them, if somebody sees symbolism in it, if somebody feels that there is a theme in there that was relevant to the current world or whatever, what's going on in their private lives, that's complete fluke. I just want
knowing that.
I just want to write stories, and if they ding dongs, that's sort of kind of yeah.
That's very comforting to me. I'm so glad to hear that I'm not the only one that.
Pure entertainment. Yeah.
Just want to make things up.
We make things up. But one of my favorites is when people come up and say, "Oh my gosh, your theme of whatever just meant so much to me," and we're like, "Yeah, meant to do that."
Me and my themes. Me and my
themes. That should be a song. Okay. Lisa, your first few novels, starting with 1999's Ralph's Party, followed by 30 Nothing, One Hit Wonder, and A Friend of the Family, might have been described as romantic comedies, or that word we hate.
You're going to say it, aren't you?
I'm not. I'm just going to let it be assumed, right?
Okay, good. The word that
I'm not going to say it. But like the 4 of us, your writing has changed through your career, somewhat dramatically. Somewhere along the way, Lisa Jewell's writing seemed to have taken a dark turn. Yes. And now your psychological thrillers are being compared to Gillian Flynn, Lisa Foley, even Karen Slaughter. So how did that happen? Yeah. Did you wake up one day and think, I'm going to get my creep on?
No, but precisely the opposite. And I do know I have got friends, contemporaries, who were writing in the same genre as me back in the noughties and the early, what do we call them, 10s? I don't know.
I don't either.
who did do that, who were writing in one genre and then decided they'd had enough of that and they wanted to try something brand new and fresh. And quite often they had to change their names, their pen names, or move publisher. And it was a big dramatic leap and a huge experiment. Whereas I was very, very fortunate in as much as I was allowed to feel my way quite slowly, book by book. I've always had editors who just gave me free rein to do what I want and didn't expect me to write to any sort of formula or to keep repeating successes. And yeah, so I've just sort of, I was kind of in a way like sort of hoping that nobody would notice I was doing it. Just like,
we're calling you out, Lisa. Calling you out.
I mean, like, I haven't written a romantic relationship in this book. Do you think anyone will notice? Do you think I'm going to get complaints? And then I didn't. And then just be like, that's a really, really dark storyline I just introduced into that book. Do you think anyone would notice? And then they didn't. And then I killed someone and nobody ever said anything. Nobody ever said, stop, enough, please. We don't want you writing this sort of stuff. So yeah, I just kept pushing and pushing very gently and subtly and got away with it. And thank God I did, because it's been amazing for me personally as a writer in my career. The psychological thrillers have been much, much bigger for me than the romantic comedies ever were. So yeah, it's been a good journey. Lots of positive moves.
It makes me think of the whole like frog in the boiling water.
Yes.
Right. Like if you turn the water up slowly, the frog won't notice. But if you throw him in boiling water, he'll jump out.
Yeah.
And Lisa, you just turning the heat up a little bit, turning the creep up a little bit, a little bit.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Yes. But I actually think with this book, with The Family Remains, I kind of cranked it back down a bit.
Did you?
Yes. I think it's got more in common with some of the books I was writing after I started writing romantic comedies. I thought the family dramas with dark secrets that I was writing. There's a few of them, like The Making of Us and The House We Grew Up In, and The Third Wife, and that. So yeah, I think it's almost gone backwards a little bit to that. But the book that I just finished writing last month, it's dark.
We'll have to leave the lights on after we read that one, right?
Yeah, you will.
I love that. Well, Lisa, talk to us about these very damaged and in a couple of cases monstrous characters that you created. We have Lucy and Henry Lamb, Libby, Finn, Michael Rimmer, Birdie, many of them holdovers from the family upstairs, as you mentioned. Where do these troubled people come from?
Oh, that's such a good question. So, for example, you've got, like you say, David and Birdie, who are the really, really they're the villains of the piece in The Family Upstairs. They're horrific characters who are capable of inflicting great pain and cruelty on people. And because I wrote about them from a remove, at a remove, I would love to write a book just about David and Birdie and get into their heads and find out why they were the way they were. I think narcissism played a part, sociopathy played a part. But then you've got the other bad characters, and you could say that Henry Lamb is a bad character, but he's a different proposition because he's introduced to the reader at the age of 10, just about to turn 11, and he's a little boy. He hasn't done anything wrong yet. He's slightly odd. And yeah, so he just grew on the page as all these bad things happened to him. This slightly odd boy turned into this really quite devious, depraved, very dark teenager who at one point is responsible for the accidental death of a cat. And for those who don't like animals dying in books, this is a horrible cat. But it's a horrible cat. Nobody liked the cat, but yes, he's accidentally responsible for the death of a cat and keeps the cat's tail because it's soft and pretty. But at the same time, he also saves everybody in the house and cares about his mother and tries to rescue his mother from all the terrible things that she's allowing to happen to her and her family. So he's much more ambiguous. He's a much grayer character. And yeah, so he comes from a different place. So there are different levels of bad character. The more developed ones where I kind of inside their heads and I can understand what makes them tick and why they are the way they are. And then there's the people like David and Birdie who I just look at in shock and all, just like, who are you awful people?
How did you get there? Yeah.
We don't know a lot about Birdie and David.
No.
In the Family Remains, but now you did give us a horrifying look at a bad guy named Michael Rimmer.
Oh yeah, Michael. Well, Michael. So I've written a lot about this. Is a relationship that is. We're first introduced to Michael Rimmer in the first book, and he is the ex-husband of Lucy Lamb, who is Henry's sister. And we don't see much of him, but we see enough to know that he's a bad one. He's a nasty man, but we don't really understand how his relationship with Lucy worked when they were married. So I thought this was a really good opportunity to see what sort of husband he actually was. So in the second book, he's married to his second wife, who's called Rachel. And we watch the relationship from the day they meet until the end, until she finds out that he was murdered in the first book. And yeah, it's a terribly coercively abusive relationship, and it's something that I write about so much in my books. As so many of my books contain this as a theme, because I was myself in a coercive marriage in my early 20s for 5 years. So, and I guess it's a kind of therapy. It's a kind of, if I keep revisiting this theme from lots of different angles and getting lots of different types of characters involved in the same situation where two people meet and this terrible toxic thing happens where one person manipulates the other person, it's something I just keep writing about. So yeah, Michael was just yet another sort of character that I've used to explore themes that I just find absolutely endlessly fascinating. And not a nice man, Michael Rimmer, unfortunately.
I think it's endlessly fascinating too, because you never truly get to the end of it. You can try to figure out a reason, but it's this damaged.
I know, and I'm assuming I've got like another 20 or 30 years of writing ahead of me, and who knows how many more times I'm going to delve into this dynamic, this weird thing that can happen in some relationships, until and ever find an answer, because I don't think I will ever understand how some people want to control other people and how other people allow themselves to be controlled in that way. That awful thing that can happen. So expect more in books.
It's very relatable. I mean, I think we all, have either been in a situation or watched a situation from the outside to varying degrees, maybe not quite a Lisa Jewell book level, but to a degree where you have seen that.
Oh, absolutely. You just see tiny little flickers of behavior in couples that and you just think, I wouldn't let somebody talk to me like that. Or why has she cancelled that plan just because he wants? I'm talking as if the man is always the abuser. It's not always the case in coercive relationships. It can often be the woman who controls the man, because it's not a physical thing. But yes, it is. It's there, even as you say, not to the incredibly dark degree that I write about it in my novels, but it's there a lot just in relationships. That you see.
That just reminds me, we've all been watching, not all of us, but Meg turned us all on to the Bad Sisters.
Bad Sisters.
Oh
my gosh.
I haven't started it yet.
That to me the other day.
Forward.
So good.
Talk about a coercive bad
Is it good?
villain.
It's so good.
Oh,
It's
maybe
so
I'll start
good.
watching that. I didn't like the sound of it. It sounded a bit cheesy. But maybe
No, I don't think it's cheesy. It's it definitely has humor because she's a comedian, but the writing is brilliant, I think, and the character development is great. And she sort of trickles the drama out over time. At first, you don't realize how bad the guy is that they all want to kill, and then you're like, you want to kill him too,
Yeah. Definitely, that's it. That's twice in a week I've had that recommended to me. It's going on my watching list.
That's very good. Makes me want to move to Poland.
Yes, makes me want to move to Dublin. Definitely.
Okay, now, Lisa, I read that you mentioned DC Samuel Owusu. Am I saying that right? Owusu?
Correct. Absolutely correct. Yeah.
The chief detective investigating the discovery of these skeletal remains. And you call him an accidental creation.
Yeah.
And so I was fascinated by your admission that you don't read traditional crime novels and that you had no intention of ever writing anything like a police procedural.
Yeah.
And in your previous novels, talented amateur sleuths unravel the crime. So what changed with this book?
It was him. I can't explain it. I knew I'd got quite a way into the book before I realized that I wanted to introduce something that was more, like I was saying, I felt like I'd gone much more back to the family dramas, and I wanted to introduce something into the structure of the book that would make it feel more like a crime novel, more like what people would expect from one of my books these days. And I also thought I needed to go back more to the house from the first book, because it wasn't getting much of a role in this second installment. And so I thought, Birdie's bones, whatever happened? In the first book, Henry chucks her bones in the river, and I thought that could be an amazing starting point. What if somebody finds the bones? And that would necessitate somebody trying to find out what happened in that house. And I'd imagined that there would be this scene at the beginning where they find the bones, and it would be a mudlarker on the shores with a bunch of tourists, finds the bones, calls the police, policeman turns up. And I randomly gave him and his colleague names, but I didn't have really much of a clue of who they were, what they looked like. And then I wasn't really going to go back to them again. It was just going to be the opening scene. It was my prologue. Here are the bones. Here are the policemen. They've come to take the bones away, and they'll do forensics on them. And then they'll find out who the bones belong to. And then the whole thing will unravel. But I just kept going back to him. I kind of wanted to be along with him. I wanted to follow him. I wanted to be there when he got the forensic report back, and be there when he found out the name of the victim, and be there and as he got closer and closer to the unbearable truth of the story about that weird house. So yeah, I just kind of followed him around and let him do his detective things, and felt very, very nervous because I don't write police procedure, and here was a policeman doing procedure and I was very worried that I was doing it all wrong. But nobody's written to me from a police force anywhere in the world at this point to say you've done it all wrong. So I'm hoping I got away with it. But yeah, he was absolutely accidental. He was supposed to be in the prologue and then disappear. But he stuck around for the whole book. And I loved him.
I liked him too. He was so circumspect.
Yes. I wanted him to be pure. He was very pure, I thought. He was pure essence of detective. There was nothing else clouding his job. He didn't have a backstory or an addiction or a damage or PTSD or any of those things that detectives are supposed to have. He was just pure essence of detective, which I really liked. I really enjoyed that.
Well, let's take a sneak peek inside the mind of Lisa Jewell. Where do your ideas come from? And we're wondering if your training in fashion and design made you an unusually eagle-eyed observer of human nature.
Oh, right. Okay. Ideas. Yes, I'll debunk that second bit very quickly, but the first bit, ideas. Yeah, I don't have very many. I'm not really an ideas collector. I'm not like a magpie who goes around life thinking, oh, that would make a good book, or oh, that would make a good book, or oh, I'd love to write about that. I'd love that. I don't. I walk around just looking at things and wondering about people and looking through people's windows and just looking and wondering and thinking. And then every now and then I'll just get this sort of shivery feeling of just like, oh, now that's just sort of jumped out of the wallpaper a bit and taken on an extra dimension. And when I get that shivery feeling, I know that that's my idea. And it's not really an idea. It's like we were talking about earlier. It's not a big theme or something that's, I think, has got some sort of social message or anything to impart or anything symbolic going on. It's just like the book that I just finished writing. I looked through the window of a house on a very cold, miserable January day when I was walking the dog, and I saw this man sitting in the window of his house at his laptop, and I just wanted to write about him. There was nothing about him. There was something about,
wow,
I don't know what it was. There was something suggestive of secrets behind him, and I sort of mentally followed the outline of his flat, what I could see through the window, and imagined what was in the other end of the hallway, and there was a shut door, and there was a teenage girl behind that closed door, and what was going on with her, and why is she? So that's where they're not ideas, they're just feelings.
They're images. It sounds like images,
just things
that you take to the next level.
Yeah. But in terms of the fashion thing, no. I mean, No, I was no. I don't think it's got anything to do with my interest in fashion. I like clothes. I don't really like fashion per se. Not really interested in fashion. I just like clothes. I like to wear nice clothes. And so she's sitting here in just like a big black sack. But no, and I was once asked this by a man who'd read my entire backlist and asked me that exact same question. He said, because there's so many descriptions of what women are wearing and the interiors of their homes, and I said, all women do that when they write. No woman can write a description of a character without describing what they're wearing. No woman can write a description of somebody's home without saying what the wallpaper looks like or what color the cushions are. It's just what we do. We're women, and that's how we see the world, is in that sort of detail. So I don't think you need to study fashion to have that sort of eye for detail.
But now you do have Rachel Gold, who is a jewelry designer, as a character in this book.
Yes, she is. And I purely made her a jewelry designer because of her surname, really. So the surname came first. And I thought, what could she do? What could she do for a living? It needs to be something where it's all quite precarious and she hasn't started making any money yet. So it's like a startup thing and her dad's having to support her financially. What could it be? What could it be? Oh, that's gold. It could be a jeweler. So yeah, that's where that came from. Inspired.
Well, Lisa,
well, we always want to be able. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. You go ahead.
I would say we always want to peg down where ideas came from so that the next idea will come quicker. But we can't. We can never. It's a dream. It's an image. It's something somebody said. It's a curiosity. But we keep thinking if we can peg down where it came from, then we'll know what to do next.
That's exactly right. And I was out with writers on Tuesday night, and one of them was having a nightmare because she's out of contract and she feels very strongly that she wants to present her publishers with something that's so, in terms of a synopsis and a title and some blurb, that's so immediate. And so here it is. You really, how could you not want to publish this amazing thing that I haven't started writing yet? But you can just read it. It's going to be throwing money at me. And it just doesn't. It never works like that. The thing is there after you've written it. Then you can take it to a publisher and say, look at this amazing thing I wrote.
It's so true.
But you can't, that thing. And so she's been weeks and weeks trying to find this big idea. And that's not how the great books start. They don't start with a big idea. They start with...
They start with the work.
Yes. They start with a shiver and then some words on a screen. And then
a lot of...
Gosh, and isn't it the best feeling in the world?
Yes!
So good when you just get that little tingle and you don't know what it is, but you have it, and you don't know what it is, but you know it. It's just
it's the best. I'm actually getting goosebumps while you're saying that.
Well, Lisa, you oh my goodness, I'm just sitting here thinking how much I know everyone's going to love this show so much. And they're going to be like, we want Lisa again. You're so great. We love a good writing tip. We say it's for the audience, but it's really for us. So if you have a writing tip, I feel like you've already given us so many, but if you have another one, we would love a writing tip.
God. I mean, because that's like little tiny tips or like massive tips to get you off the starting blocks and get you onto your computer and start writing. There's sort of so many different little things. And of course, everybody does things differently. Like my writing tip to myself is get everything done before you start writing. Whereas I know most writers I know can't get anything else done until they've written. So that what works for me wouldn't necessarily work for other people. But I think just in terms of if you're wanting to just get off the starting blocks, is just to be you have to be sort of fearless. And also not... It's just getting the words on the screen and not worrying about whether it was a good word or a bad word or what it means, or just to get the words onto the screen. This is a terrible tip. This is a terrible tip.
It's very real.
That's how I do it every day. Is I don't think, what am I going to achieve today? Well, what I'd like to do is move the plot along to this point, and then I'm going to have an arc, and then I don't. I just sit and think I've got to write 1,000 words. So just focus on getting the words on the screen, and then the magic happens after you've done that typing. It's just you look back on it and you think, wow, actually that worked really well. And
Now there actually is a character arc, and somebody
Yes,
did move forward, and
exactly.
something happened.
Or you read it the next day and think, well, that was garbage, and I'm going to have to get rid of all of it.
Which
But at
is
least
what the
it moved
delete
you
button is
forward.
for.
The salt mines, yeah.
Yeah, like it moved you forward. It got you to another day. It's 1,000 words closer to the end. And
yes, exactly.
Let's do it.
yeah.
Well, we are curious what you're reading. So we've stolen this from the New York Times book review, but are there any books on your nightstand, before you tell us what you're loving, are there any books on your nightstand we might be surprised?
No, I'm literally the opposite of that, in as much as pretty much everything I read is similar to the stuff I write. I love
Okay.
Yeah. I'm so unadventurous. It's so unusual for me to jump out of my comfort zone. The reason why I keep looking like that is because, although you can't see it on screen, my reading TBR pile is right behind me, and there's about 200 books on it.
Yeah, we know.
Yeah. Anything that you wouldn't expect. No, I think you would pretty much expect everything.
So what have you absolutely loved lately? Like blown off the top of your head, like, oh my gosh, that was so good.
Yeah, well, you probably have already been aware of this book because it's a Reese's current pick. Or does she do monthly picks? Or I don't know how.
Monthly.
Yeah,
monthly. Oh, well, then it was last month. So it's called Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Gillian McAllister, which is a time hop psychological thriller, which, if it had been done badly, could have been
cheesy,
terrible. But she's done it so beautifully, and the character development in it is extraordinary, and the detail, and it's just perfect. I'm saying that I read that a year ago. I read that in October. It didn't come out until this year, though. And I'm trying to think if I've read a book that's blown my socks off since. I must have, but of course I can't think of it right now in the moment. But I'm going on holiday this time next week. I will be in Tenerife, and so I'm already doing that wonderful thing when you're about to pack a suitcase and sit on a sun lounger, and you're mentally sort of compiling your
book list.
Yeah.
What are you bringing?
I'm taking Hidden Pictures by Jason Rekulak. Has anybody read that?
No, not yet.
Oh, that's a massively hyped book of the moment, and I've been saving it. I'm also taking a book called A Flaw in the Design by Nathan Oates, who I think is American. And that's a psychological thriller, and that's got a lot of hype going on about it as well. And I'm taking, I'm going to show you that one just purely because it's to hand. This one, it's called Bad Fruit by
I've heard, I keep hearing about that one.
Ella King. Which, again, I think, is she American, Ella King? No, she's British, but I think it's set in America. So I've got those, and then I've also got Gillian McAllister, who wrote Wrong Place, Wrong Time, has just sent me the proof of her next book. So I'm going to do exactly what I did in October last year and read Gillian McAllister and get blown away by it, I hope. So
it's exciting.
Yeah.
It's so funny. Some authors say, I won't read what's in my genre, and you're saying that's all you read.
Yes, I wish I could be more adventurous. I wish I read more, a wider variety of things.
We love what we love, and that's
yes,
that's right,
exactly.
Well, Lisa, if you wouldn't mind sticking around for another minute, we have more to talk about with you. But first, I want to tell you about our Writer's Block podcasts with all of us and our beloved, all of you. Well, no, sometimes me. I'm on there too.
Yeah, you're on there. Yeah.
All of us, yes. With our beloved librarian pal, Ron Block. We always post the links under announcements each Friday when a new episode drops. The most recent episode has Ron and Kristin talking with Frederick Bachman about his new novel, The Winners. And coming this Friday, Ron and Patti talk to Alyssa Cole and Jean Kwok about their essay contributions to the new collection, Marple, 12 New Mysteries. Listen, review, subscribe, and make sure you tell a friend if you like what you hear.
And of course, you won't want to forget about the Friends in Fiction official book club with Brenda and Lisa. With 14,000 of its own members, this club is run by our friends Lisa Harrison and Brenda Gardner, otherwise known as PB&J. They choose the books and host authors for monthly chats. So listen to all the fun things they do. They have happy hours with our Writer's Block podcast host, Ron Block, and they keep everyone in the loop about suggested reads and upcoming releases.
And we're just going to hint about it for now. We'll talk a lot more about it later, but we're all going on the road together starting next year in April, and then in May, and then in June, and then in July, and then in fall for MKA's book. So just keep your ears and eyes open.
Also, the new Friends in Fiction first edition box is available from my local indie bookstore here at the Jersey Shore, Booktown with an E in Manasquan, New Jersey. And it features all 4 signed hardback first editions from each of the Fab Four in 2023, and a Friends in Fiction kitchen towel, which reads, "Dinner can wait. It's time for Friends in Fiction." You can order from them right now at booktown.com. Remember, it's Booktown with an E.
Okay, Miss Lisa, one question we love to ask, and I'm really curious about this with you after listening to some of your history. What were the values around reading and writing when you were growing up? Like, do you think they influenced you becoming a writer? What were those in London?
Are you talking about in my family?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Values. Yes, that's such a good question. Interestingly, there were no books in my house.
Wow.
There was this one tiny fitted bookshelf in our dining room that my father filled with those leather-bound Reader's Digest condensed reads and things that he bought from the back pages of Sunday supplement magazines and what have you. And he occasionally picked up antique books in bookshops, but it had to be leather. And that was it. It was just there to look pretty. Nobody ever picked those books off the shelf and read them. But we being me, my mother and my 2 sisters were library junkies. We had a library very close to our house. And it was a really cozy library in an old Victorian house that had been converted into a library. So it was super cozy. And we just went there every single week religiously. We got out, we spent an hour there. I was all cross-legged on the carpet reading the books. And then as we got older and could read by ourselves, we'd take out, I remember the little cardboard tickets that we had in libraries before they got computerized, the little cardboard tickets.
Oh, yeah.
And so all of us read all the time, particularly my mother. My mother was always reading a book. So it wasn't seen as anything academic or intellectual. Nobody read to learn in our house, but we just read for fun. So yeah, it was a bookish house with no books in it.
A bookish house with no books. It's a great title for a book. But I also feel like 98% of the time, writers say that libraries were integral to the values when they were growing up. It's really astounding.
Definitely.
Yeah. I guess when you think of the atmosphere inside a library, it's just pure essence of book, isn't it? It's just there. You're surrounded by books and people who read and people who love reading, and it's just it's got ideas.
Yeah. Lisa, thank you so much for spending time with us tonight. Where can people find you on social media? I mean, I don't want them to track you down in London, but digital.
What's your favorite coffee shop, Lisa?
Could be a good spot for your next book.
Oh, that's so funny. I'll give you the map coordinates. On Facebook, there is an official Lisa Jewell Facebook page. It's called Lisa Jewell Official, I believe, but I don't really have any. Heads up, I don't have anything to do with that. Because I just don't have anything to do with that. But I also have my own personal Facebook page, which occasionally is up to 5,000, but occasionally I can squeeze another couple in, which is where I do most of my online stuff, which isn't very helpful, I guess, given the. And then there's Instagram, which is Lisa Jewell UK. And write to me on Instagram. I check my PMs twice a day, every day, and reply to everything. And Twitter, I don't really bother with Twitter, but I'm Lisa Jewell UK on Twitter as well. So you can also write to me there if you want, but I'm not very active.
So if maybe we'll turn the corners on you and look into your window. See you sitting there at your laptop.
Yes, absolutely. And write a novel about me. Yes.
We'll have an anthology from 4 different points of view about Lisa.
All right. Thank you so much for being with us today. And we really
Aw.
enjoyed talking to you. And everybody I know is going to want to read The Family Remains.
I hope
Thanks.
so. Thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful.
Lisa, it was a pleasure. That was
Great.
Have a
really fun.
lovely day. Take care.
Thank you. All right, everybody. Now, you can find all of our back episodes on YouTube. We're live there every week, just like we are on Facebook. And if you subscribe, you won't miss a thing. Be sure to come back right here next week when we welcome Ariel Lahan, Christina McMorris, Susan Meisner, and Santa Montefiore.
And don't go anywhere. We haven't asked us
Right.
anything after
Yeah,
show.
we do.
Yeah.
We do. Okay.
Thank you for tuning in. You can join us every week on Facebook or YouTube, where our live show airs on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Also, subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Instagram. We're so glad you're here.
That
fun.
was, yeah.
God, I could talk to her for a really long time.
She was wonderful,
Like-
and her accent is so good. I could just
Love it.
listen to her talk.
Yeah,
Forget it.
when I was doing research, I didn't ask her about this because we had so many other things we wanted to ask, but I was fascinated. She said that in her library days, she read everything. She read the whole Agatha Christie Miss Marple series,
Wow.
start to finish, and then she never read another mystery novel again.
Wow.
Wow.
She'll need to listen to our podcast episode when we have the
Yeah.
essayist.
Yeah, she will.
And,
All right,
and
so-
when we interviewed them about Miss Marple, they each had their reason that Miss
I
Marple
love
affected them, right? Like how she influenced what they write now and all that kind of stuff. So she
It's a
probably
great
wrote
idea
a
for a
great.
book, don't you think, Patti?
It's genius.
Yeah.
Take a beloved character and put her in new situations with new points of view.
Well,
They
12
all had
different-
to stick to, like, they couldn't change anything about her. They couldn't have her get married or have a kid. Like, they had to stick to who she was. But I love those constraints. It was
love
really
it.
good.
12 different writers who get to explore a beloved, lifelong beloved character.
Yeah,
Who was
I
played
mean,
by Angela Lansbury, who just passed. Yeah.
That's
Oh, I
right.
didn't know that.
Oh,
Yeah.
yesterday, I think, right?
Oh my goodness.
Yep.
Well,
so we got a lot of questions that people have been leaving for us. So let's get to those. Sue Elliott asks, what book have you read that you can never forget and why? Meg, what about you? Have you got an answer to that question?
ooh, I think I'll never forget Angela's Ashes. I feel like that book, it just is seared into my consciousness.
Ripped me apart.
Yeah, and just the writing was so beautiful and honest, and it was just a crazy eye into what extreme poverty looks like too. Because you think you don't have it so good, and then you read someone else's story. But the writing was just gorgeous, and it's just a book I'll never forget.
Yeah.
Oh, you're making me think about that book again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
you
can
guys?
remember reading that
Thank you.
and reading when the young boy they're licking the bacon wrapper
Yeah.
because that's all they've got.
Insane.
Yep.
What about you?
I'm kind of floored by this question right now. I'm going to pass it on to Kristy.
Somebody was talking about on the page the other day about their high school students reading The Kite Runner, which obviously has been around for like a long time. I think I read it in high school too. And I was just thinking about how like searing that novel is, like how there are just things about that book that sort of are like haunting and you can kind of never forget. Do you know what else? This is like not what I was going to say, but I was just thinking about this book. The Girls. Did any of you guys read that book?
Yes, I
Yeah.
loved it.
Yes.
About
It
the
was
Manson.
about the Manson murders. Yes. That is a book that just like in the creepiest sort of way has really stuck with me, and just that ability, especially when you're young and, you can sort of be taken in by people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll echo you on the Kite Runner too, because I actually worked at Riverhead when we published that book.
Oh,
And,
wow, really?
yeah, and I got the chance to meet Khaled Hosseini at sales conference. He came to sales conference. I didn't meet him at the conference. I met him at the bar after, where everybody went to see the Rock Bottom Remainders. I don't know if everybody knows who they are. It's a rock band made up of famous authors like Stephen King and Amy Tan, Dave Barry, and he was at the bar, and I did the most unprofessional thing and just went up and completely fangirled over him and told him basically how that I would never forget his book, and it kind of changed me. And
Cool.
sometimes you have to do that,
Yeah. No, I feel like if you run into somebody whose book affected you, I met him in Birmingham when he came on tour for his next novel, and I got to talk to him, and I spent the first 5 minutes like,
But like, who doesn't want to hear that too, though? Like, does that ever get old for people to be like, "Wow, your book was amazing and changed my life"? Like, are you like, "Oh God, I'm so tired of hearing that"?
Please don't tell me what I do all day, every day has impacted you.
Yeah. Patti, you have one?
I mean, like 100, or well, not 100, but there's so many going through my head. But I think I'm going to stick with for now, and maybe we can even ask this again. But I will never forget Beach Music by Pat Conroy. Mm-hmm. I remember reading that, and from the. In case you haven't read it, I don't want to give anything away, but even the opening scene, you're just like, how did he do that? How did he do that? And then you find out later, of course, that he mined the compost pile of his life.
Yeah. And
then even more so, he hits something like right here, and there's scenes in that novel I'll never be able to get out of my head. So I'm going to say that one for sure.
I join you on that one too. I mean, I even remember where I was when I was reading it, and I have these memories sometimes of like sitting in this beach chair on this very beach, in Spring Lake, New Jersey, and like just being riveted. Like, no, you guys go in the water. No, you go get lunch. I'll just be right here, like glued to my chair. And then this silly, but I worked at Doubleday too when he was published there, and he came into the office. He came into the office one day, and it's really, I think, the only time I was ever so starstruck by someone. I couldn't speak to him. I just was like, just go to the next office, please.
Excuse me. Go. Could you move on? Could you just move on down there, please?
Very busy.
Very, very, very busy. Yeah.
I feel silly now because I work so closely with you guys, and you were friendly with him, and but it was in that moment I was like, I can't talk to him. He wrote Beach Music and Prince of Tides.
Yeah, I think too, getting to know him, he, you all did, but he, that was real, like all that pain and all that, like he poured it into those pages. And so I've never been able to forget that. And then knowing later that how real it was. So I think I'm going to stick with that answer. How about you, MKA?
I wish I could say something very literary. I do remember I was living in Savannah when I read The Lords of Discipline, which is about Pat's time at the Citadel.
Yeah.
And not so much just about that, but about Charleston and the way people in Charleston thought about people, in the upstate, which was so déclassé. Yeah. But, I read Rebecca at a formative time in my life. And that book stuck with me. And I think it started my fascination with old houses, big, creepy old houses.
I see that. I see that all over your writing.
Yeah. I mean, I read as a young girl, my sisters and I read a ton of Victoria Holt. My sister and I read huge numbers of Gothic novels, Victoria Holt. And so, and I'll never forget the opening line. Last night I dreamt I was at Menderley again. So
I think that's a great book to never forget. Yeah.
Yeah. Sure. And I mean, it's not a very sympathetic book when you think about the way Max treated you never know the narrator's name. Her name is never told in that whole novel.
Yeah.
I remember reading Jamaica Inn
Yeah.
in middle school. And it was like as a part of a class.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, yeah.
what? Like, who is like, we should have 7th graders read Daphne du Maurier. Why not? Like,
Yeah.
So I had never read her. And when I was in England a couple months ago and I was in Cornwall, I thought, I want to read something set here. So I read a Poldark. And then I was like, I want to read another book set here because there's something about reading in the setting where you are.
Right.
And so the little library at my inn had all these Daphne books because she lived there. She lived in Cornwall. And I picked one up called The House at the End of the Strand, I think it was called.
Mm-hmm.
It was so creepy and so good. And it was based on the house she actually lived in. And I will not forget that book either, probably because I was like the setting and the book and everything she talked about was 3 miles away. But I was like, oh, this is why Kathy likes these books, because it was all about the house. It was about.
Do you know that she wrote the short story, The Birds?
Yes, I did know.
The Hitchcock movie was made from a short story.
I did not know.
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah.
I did. I read that in the biography in that book. I was like, oh, but that house is everything in the story, Kathy. Like it's
Let me ask this next one of you guys.
Yeah.
Reply to me. It applies to you.
Okay.
From one of our long-standing Friends in Fiction regulars, Sharon Carlson Person, wants to know from you guys.
Sharon.
With so many books out, how do you each decide who to dedicate your books to?
Oh, wow.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
I could take this one. I obviously have fewer novels than the other two, but it's just always been really obvious, if that makes sense.
Oh.
Like, it's like the book goes with the person. Like, I don't even know, like The Wedding Veil. Like, it was really obvious that I would dedicate it to my sister-in-law and my cousin because they had both worn the veil and kind of like inspired part of the story of like us all wearing the same wedding veil. And I don't know. Yeah. Even like Under the Southern Sky, I had 2 friends that were like very instrumental in telling me stories that like led to me writing Under the Southern Sky. And The Summer of Songbirds, well, like she probably won't read this. She doesn't know this yet, but like I'm dedicating to like a friend who like absolutely loves summer camp and made us go to family camp. And it just seems like she's the person that should be dedicated to. I don't know.
Go ahead, MKA. How do you decide?
Oh gosh, sometimes it's obvious. Sometimes not.
Oh.
Well, you have a lot. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I know the last book was dedicated to Katie. You know that, but you've there in happier times. There's plenty of other. Well, you dedicated one to me. Let's talk about that.
And one to me.
And to Patti. Yeah.
And one to Friends in Fiction, so it's just me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know who the next book is going to be dedicated to yet. I have an idea.
It's probably going to be me, but she doesn't want to tell you guys because
She doesn't want to say it out loud.
Yeah.
I see some writers to make it easy on themselves dedicated to the same person every single time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be easy.
Yeah, it would be great.
Okay, I'm going to answer this, and then I have a funny story about a dedication. So I think what you two said, sometimes it's just obvious, right? So someone who inspired it or someone who was particularly influential in the book. Flora Lee is dedicated to Friends in Fiction because without y'all, I would never have written I would have written that book, but it wouldn't be the book that it is.
Right.
Without you 3 ladies plus Kristin. So all 4 of you are in the dedication.
We were pretty instrumental. I mean, I hate to brag about my large.
You did. You talked about it with me all the time. Kathy named Whisperwood. So sometimes it's obvious, but like one time I dedicated Becoming Mrs. Lewis to C.S. Lewis and Joy Davidman. Like they're no longer with us, but the book wouldn't exist without them. So I think maybe that's the answer. Like the book wouldn't exist as it does.
Yeah.
without them. But I have to tell you this story. A long time ago, I went to a book signing and talk at the Margaret Mitchell's or Atlanta History Center. I'm talking 15, 20 years ago. Oh, Kathy, Mary Kay, you're going to have to help me remember the name of the author. Kay Gibbons. You remember Kay Gibbons?
Yeah.
And she wrote beautiful historical fiction.
Yeah.
And I bought the book and I wanted her to sign it. And so I stood in line and I got up there and she opened it to the dedication page and she took a pen and she was like, and she crossed out the dedication. And she goes, this was dedicated to my husband and I don't even want his name in this book. And then she signed it to me.
Oh.
I do think about that though.
Yeah.
I do think about that. Like, what if, you've dedicated like to my great darling love, and then 10 years later, like, your great darling love is gone.
Yeah. No, not darling anymore. So anyway, I thought that was fun.
That's amazing.
All right.
So I guess the motto is be careful, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always look. Don't y'all always look?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
That and acknowledgements.
Yeah, I always look at acknowledgements too.
I do too.
Yeah.
We have one more. I want to. Yes, let's do the one about the weirdest inscription a reader wanted in an autographed book, and I will tell you mine after somebody else tells theirs.
I don't think I have one. I mean, I've had people say happy birthday or say to my mom, who is the best person in the world, or funny things like that. But I don't think I've ever had anything really bizarre.
Yeah, I haven't done anything weird. I've like on multiple occasions had someone put like, will you put like to my best friend so and so that like when I'm dead and my grandchildren look at this book, they'll be like, wow, she was best friends with the author.
Yeah, that's funny.
I think it's funny.
So my second book was a mystery, and it was called To Live and Die in Dixie. And when the paperback came out, it had a Siamese cat on the cover, along with a bust of Robert E. Lee. It was not a very well done bust of Robert E. Lee. I later learned that he had the wrong hat. But in that book, and it reminds me of what Lisa was just saying, the bad guys kill a cat. It's a very elderly Siamese cat. And they are doing that to let Callahan, my character, know that she's next. I mean, she's going to die next if she doesn't quit poking at rocks. So I was signing the book, and right after I turned the book in and after it came out, I was with a bunch of other mystery writers, including this very funny woman, Joan Hess, who unfortunately is no longer with us. And she said, honey, you killed a cat? Nobody told you the rule? You can't kill a cat in a mystery novel. I'm like, what? No one told me that. Yeah, no, you cannot. Mystery readers love cats. You cannot kill a cat. I'm like, okay, well, now I know. But I was at a signing.
You never did it again.
I was at a signing at a mystery bookstore, and a woman came up to me and she said, well, I know the booksellers here very well, and they just warned me that a cat dies in this book. And I said, yeah, I'm sorry. But it wasn't me. It was the bad guys. And she said, okay, well, I want you to find the page in the book where the cat dies and put a big X through it so that I won't read it. And then I want you to sign it to me. And I need a pledge from you that you will never kill a cat in a book ever again.
Oh my gosh, that's
wow. So I was like, I swear to God, I will never kill a cat in a book again.
And you've never done it
again? No, I've killed babies. I've killed old ladies. No one cares. No one cares. Nobody says a word when gang members blow away a baby, which happened in that same book. No one said a word about the baby, but they were not happy. Yeah, I don't know.
I think Mary Kay. I think that's the perfect way to end, with Mary Kay's vow to never kill another cat.
Never kill a cat. And there is not a dead cat in my fourth.
On my honor, I do swear.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. That's it for us tonight.
Good night, y'all.
Good night.